All right, well, kia ora guys, how's it all going? Welcome to like this NZGDC thing, right at the very end of the day, so one more to go, I guess, and then get ready for the next day tomorrow. All right, so basically what I'm going to be doing today is talking about a decade of change and how art has evolved in the industry and how our careers and everything has kind of evolved ever since then as well. So yeah, we'll get this thing started. Oh yeah, I made some slides, cool. So basically the way that things are going to be working is we're going to go through, just introduce ourselves up here and the people that are going to be talking on this panel. Then we're going to break into some sort of like conversations around preparing for the industry, breaking into the industry, our kind of life and day-to-day work within the industry ourselves, moving forwards, stepping up, and then some pro tips and question time sort of thing afterwards at the very end. So without further ado, who are we? So I'm the guy in the middle there. My name is Michael Bastians, but everyone pretty much just calls me Mikey, as it is anyway. I'm one of the art department leads over at Cerebral Fix. We are a studio based down in Christchurch, and we tend to do a lot of work for hire sort of work, but Disney is basically one of our bigger clients there as well. But we've also started looking into a lot of work within like the LBE or like those location-based experiences and stuff like that as well. So a bunch of work with retro stage production sort of work, some theme park stuff. It's all very fun and it's all over the place. We've changed a lot as we've gone through the years. Cool. Shem.
Hey everyone, my name's Shem Dawson. I'm an art lead on World of Warcraft. I work at Blizzard Entertainment and I've been there for almost 7 years now. Yeah, that's me.
That's me.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Matt Gretton. I'm the art director at Out of Dawn Games, Entertainment Games, up in North Shore, Auckland. We are an independent mobile game studio making our own IPs, and our current titles are Mana Monsters and Grimguard Tactics. Thank you.
Nice. Hey guys, I'm Campbell Crawford. I'm a senior concept artist at Rocketworks. Currently working on Icarus. That is it.
Short and sweet.
I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. So an interesting thing about all of us up here is at one stage or another we've kind of worked at Cerebral Fix early on in the days, but ever since then we've kind of all gone off and broken off in different ways, but I've kind of just stayed at the company anyway. Everyone else has kind of like spread their wings and flown off and they've gone other places. But the next thing is, how did we even prepare to get into the industry in the first place? So the first thing I got is, what sort of qualifications did you have before you got your first role? So, or what did you have to study? Might as well start with you, Shem.
All right, I'll take a swing at that.
Yeah.
So I had an interesting story in the sense that I started into the industry reasonably late in the game. I was a professional salesperson up until I was 28. And then I just decided that my passion for art and video games was so much to the point where I was just like, I have to make a change. I want to do this. And it was scary because obviously already having a career that was going pretty well made it sort of like, oh, do I really need to do this? Am I getting into this? Am I too old? How would that even work? Am I going to be competitive? But it actually worked out really well. I finished my old career and studied for about 2 years. And then I actually found that there was some positive stuff about coming from a career that already had cross-transferable skills in sales, being able to talk to people, being able to communicate effectively and being able to relate to people well. Actually worked really well in 3D and in the industry in a way that I never thought about. And I think a lot of the reason with my trajectory in my career going into more leadership roles and things like that, it's actually helped fast track that. So I would challenge anyone who's sort of looking at going into the industry and thinking about, oh, maybe it's too late or maybe I'm too old for this or what. Just ignore that stuff. If it's your passion and that's what you want to do, just go for it. And if you do that, you'll be fine. You'll find a place that will find value for you and that will get value from you, and you'll be able to contribute to that, and you'll definitely get there. So don't be discouraged.
Cool.
It's hard to top that. I had a different approach. I finished high school, and I think we've all been kicking around art as we've been growing up. I finished high school and I worked at a small publication company where I was doing a few of the illustrations, and I eventually moved off into graphic design at an advertising firm, very small one, and not very creative advertising. It was very much car dealerships and real like hardcore, just straight up, here's how many toilets I can fit into a picture. Yeah, and and similar to what Shem had said, the whole time I've been doing this, I've always wanted to imagine working in a game studio. I've played games all my life. I've been making fake games by concepting in the background, and I eventually took the jump and I left this advertising firm and I jumped here to New Zealand and tried to make my way in the same line of work, actually. And it never worked out until one day I ran into the guys at Cerebral Fix, Ben. We got chatting. I was almost running out of my visa, and he took me on. He took a shot at me. Yeah, never looked back. One thing that Shem said as well is because I did something different to games prior to that, working with very hard clients who are very uncompromising and they want specific things. It made me learn the tricks of negotiating and sort of compromising between what I was trying to achieve and what they wanted. And that really helped me in the position I am now.
Cool. I think my story is a little bit similar to yours in a way. Like I think I started out just doing the usual, like go to tertiary to study and get a better job. And at that time, I only ever assumed graphic design, architecture. At that time, sort of animation was kind of coming in. That was kind of on the radar for something you could do as a job. So whether Disney, Pixar, whatever. So I studied to be a graphic designer. But at some point throughout the course, I saw animation students doing their thing. I was extremely interested. And then I was fortunate enough to meet two people doing concept art. And at that point in time, like, I loved video games. I sort of like appreciated them, but I didn't know how they were made or like that art was actually something you could apply to a video game, especially in the way that I was doing like drawing and stuff. And that was the point that sort of clicked, like that was an actual job that I should probably pursue if I love it that much. And talking to those guys, they actually just explained what the role of a concept artist was, and that sounded like it was a bit of me. So I changed my stream at the third year, realized I was probably under-equipped to change my stream at the very last year and try to get a job, and gunned it from that point onwards. And I was very lucky to have in Christchurch Cerebral Fix. Well, Stigma Studios at the time were kind of just opening up, and I just wandered into the studio and had a talk with them. And they were quite keen to get some people and start working. And that's how it all started.
Good old Dragon Master Spellcaster.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess my background was, so basically I was at high school last year. All of my subjects that I took were like art painting, art history, art design, graphics art, and calculus. One of them doesn't quite fit in there very well. But the reason why I kind of picked calculus, because I had started getting a little bit of an interest in doing games and stuff as well. And I thought that, if I'm gonna have to do coding, I'm gonna actually have to deal with numbers at some point in time. And then never really had to really deal with all that sort of stuff. So that was kind of like a wasted subject, should have taken stats. But then afterwards, I was trying to figure out, all right, what do I actually do? Where do I make a career? How am I gonna actually make money doing art? And then so it's very similar to what you were just saying beforehand, Campbell, where it's like, what can actually make money? And at the time, the only thing that I could think of was probably architecture. And then so I remember getting on like just driving over to the University Open Day to check out the architecture course. And on the way there, just passing a billboard for media design school saying like, make characters for games and everything like that. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Did the Open Day thing at the university, and then afterwards I was like, do I do this or do I check out the other thing? Got back home, flipped a coin, and decided to go to the 3D animation course and just tried to wing it from there. So studied at Media Design School up in Auckland, did the 3D animation course, and this is going back to when they used to be on the Queen Street campus. Now they've changed, I think, 2 or 3 times now or something like that. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, then afterwards I did the game development course there, and then we had on one of the graduation nights, Ben and Stephen from Cerebral Fix at the time, they kind of like all showed up. And then they were talking to us, gave us some business cards. And then I spent maybe about 6 months on the unemployment benefit trying to find a job within the industry. And then eventually down the line, they said, hey, we need you to help, we need some 3D people working on this project. I'm like, yeah, sure. When do you want to start? I'm like, I can start whenever. So I get to the Christchurch, figure out what project I'm working on. It's Transformers. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be pretty sweet. Transformers is an awesome game. But then it's like, you have to rig and animate and make them all transform. And I've only got like 3 years of experience with trying to figure out on the fly how to rig and animate all of that stuff. Was kind of a crazy experience as it was, but our studio at the time, there was only couple of artists and everything like that, and then I was like the only 3D, didn't really have anyone to really learn from, so it was a bit of a mad dash there, I think, as it was. But one interesting thing here is like this whole idea of trying to get into the industry. I think we were kind of fortunate, at least in our cases, where we just met the right contacts and stuff like that, and then creating a portfolio was just like, it's nice to have one, but you could almost get in the job by showing off like one cool piece of art, having good conversation with people. But now things are a lot more competitive these days, and I'm just wondering what your guys' thoughts were on how fierce you see competition is within the industry, like for people trying to get into these sort of like entry-level jobs.
That's a good question. Yeah, I think my thoughts on that one are, you're right, it is a very competitive industry, and there is so many artists out there now, and with the explosion of social media now and all the platforms and Twitter and Instagram and ArtStation and everything like that, there's so many people that have a forum to present to the world. And I think you've got to think about it more globally now. You can't think about it locally. Like, you've got to think like, when you're looking at your art and you're trying to get into the industry, you can literally get a job anywhere in the world and still live in New Zealand. You don't have to move to those countries now. And I guess, you know, to that extent with the COVID stuff, a lot of businesses has had to sort of reconfigure how they work and how they employ their artists. And for instance, Blizzard being a good example, you know, prior to this happening, we were very much a studio-based company. With all the pandemic and stuff going on, it forced us to rethink about how we're going to do this, because, you know, it's not safe to work in an environment where everyone's very close together. We need that social distancing, so we needed to start implementing workflows around remote work and things. So without rambling too much about that, I think, firstly, I wouldn't be discouraged by the competition out there. I'd use it to fuel your passion and use it as an honest check up. Like, look at what people are doing out there. Look at what artists are, where you want to go. Look at what they're doing. Seek honest feedback from your peers, from your colleagues, from your mum and dad. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you want to have people looking at your work and giving them, you want to seek that honest feedback. Do you think this measures up? Where do you think it's not measuring up? Because I think a pitfall could be that a lot of artists, sort of when they're trying to break into the industry, because they're not asking those questions, I see it time and time again with artists that are potentially going to be employed. They think that their art level is kind of here, when realistically, when you're looking at where they're planning to go, it's a little bit lower than that. And I think you can avoid a lot of that by seeking honest feedback and critique from everyone, and trying to make yourself present online in forums, ask questions. How do you think about this, guys? What do you think? Because so many industry people are out there on social media, they're looking at things, they're looking at artwork. So even though there is a lot of competition, there's also a lot more potential eyes on your work from all over the world. So even though it can be discouraging, I would say try to use it as a strength, and try to use it as a platform where you can actually get advice and help from these people.
Yeah, as Shem said, with the competition, there's also, the opportunities are abundant now as well. You don't necessarily you're not likely to always get the #1 A studio that you want to enter to, but it's getting some skin in the game and getting started somewhere is not something to look down on. Even if you had entered it from a non-specific game dev role, it's still very healthy, and you can always build that portfolio in the background. That is one of the advantages of being an artist, is it's such a visual platform that you could be working on in almost any time. Always keep building on the portfolio, always keep making the contacts. Oftentimes, that's been the #1 key into getting into some ways, because someone thinks of you, like, I remember that guy who did that great portfolio piece. He would really be a fit for this. Make those contacts. And if interacting with other people is not your thing, you can always stand out on social media. You can always make the break there.
Ooh, sweet. So this next bit just carries on a little bit more from that, which is this whole idea of breaking into the industry. I know when I first started, this is like 10 years ago sort of thing, the industry in New Zealand was pretty small at that time, as it was, and it was a little bit trickier to work overseas, because you'd usually have to have, like, if you wanted to work overseas, you needed to have those sort of like qualifications to work in certain countries, because you need to meet those visa requirements that they've got there. But 10 years ago, in New Zealand, there was very few studios. There was essentially Pickpock, I think Grinding Gears was essentially still working out of someone's basement or something like that back then. I remember seeing their website and it was just like, oh, okay, this game looks pretty cool, but I don't know where it's going to be going eventually.
A lot's changed.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, tons of change there. And down the South Island, there was pretty much, you had like, Stickman Studios was just starting up and everything as well. So there was still like it felt like there was just less than 10 studios at the time, back then as it was. And so seeing things change now where it's just like there's like 10 in pretty much every city, it kind of feels like anyway. A lot of like indie studios, and it's just so much easier for smaller groups of people to start up their own studios and stuff as well. I'm wondering what your guys' takes were on like that industry time when you first started compared to how it is now.
Good. Yeah, you get going that one.
Yeah, a lot's changed, I think. I mean, in the same way when I was explaining before, I didn't really expect video games to be much of an option for me as a job. I didn't expect like New Zealand's growth to sort of explode. I would have assumed at some point I would have had to leave New Zealand and out of necessity, not out of choice or anything, like I would just have to if I wanted to pursue that career. But as things have sort of exploded here, there's loads of options. Like there's AAA stuff, there's mobile, there's VR, there's, you know, it's all out there. And when it comes to breaking into the industry too, it's just contact people, just pick something. It's like, you know, people have to know you're actually out there searching. So a lot of the time it's just taking the opportunities, or as that pops up, you know, you're there and you can talk to them and get into it. Yeah, it's huge. It's very different.
Awesome. So the next question I have is your first sort of role that you jumped into the studio, and how different was that from what you were kind of expecting it to kind of be?
I was that guy who'd do things. I don't know what my role was when I first started. Do you know what yours was? Concept artist?
Well, when we were looking at the questions before, we were like, as we were playing this, I didn't actually know how to answer that one. Like,
Yeah.
maybe concept art. I think I just put it down to 2D artist.
2D artist.
Generalist.
Yeah, 2D artist. I think I started the same way, but then I remember branching off into UI because of the graphic design background I had, and it was a kind of hopping between those back and forth. Concept art, illustration, UI.
I remember doing my 3D showreel, and it was like, you know, took a long time, as they do. And my first job offer that came through was, "Do you want to be a concept artist?" And I was like, "All right, cool." And so, sure. And I took it because, you know, I wanted to get in there and I wanted to try it, and I learned a lot. The guys that I worked with were super cool to work with. I learned so much from them. For, you know, getting that shot was huge. And like to your point before, I think it's important to understand that, especially as a new artist breaking into the industry, be open to opportunities that may not just be the one thing that you're thinking of,
Yep.
like that flagship, I want to go work for Valve, or I want to do those things. It's like those things, it is possible, and there are some people that do that, but it is quite rare, and it's hard to do straight off the bat. So don't be discouraged if when you start your first jobs, it's not in that flagship studio that you have in mind. Keep that there as your goal and keep that driving you forward to do those things, even if you have to, on the side while you're working, if you can or whatever, work on a portfolio that reflects the sort of studio you want to work at. And hey, this is, you know, get that feedback again, and that's something that you can use to drive you forward. But coming into the industry, be open-minded to take other things that you may not thought of, that you may not have even thought of, just to get in there, because you will learn so much and you will meet people. People will start to know who you are and they'll start to recognize your work. That stuff is really important.
Yeah, just one thing as well. Like, my ambition one day was to work at a AAA studio, and, you know, of course, Blizzard's on the table, Bullfrog back in the day when I was a kid, and I very much prefer the indie environment. I prefer the independence that we have. I prefer the smaller teams. So I didn't know that until I just jumped in literally, and I found that that was actually preferred. So yeah.
Yeah, your goals kind of change over time once you're sort of dealing with it as well. Like, I think you have these ideals, and as you work through it, you just might find through experience, you might just be almost near on addicted to doing a certain type of work that would put your goal to the side at that stage, or like your ideal, I guess.
Yeah, I was very similar as well, where I think one of my things was like, what do you want to do? What company do you want to work at? And things was like Blizzard. And now it's just like, oh, I actually like where I kind of at right now. It's like different sort of experiences that you probably only get within like those sort of smaller sort of studios, especially if you're there from like the ground up, I guess, more than anything else as well.
It's not a stab at you, Shim. Just, yeah.
But another really interesting thing is this whole idea of like, all right, I see a lot of people, I know myself as well, when I made my first portfolio sort of thing, it was like advertising myself out as a character and creature artist and everything like that, especially the creature side of things. But realistically, when you're trying to find those big jobs, like most times it's not really a 100% full-time role for those particular sort of things as it is. I think I was talking to Paul Tobin yesterday about like people that want to be a character creature artist at Weta and stuff like that anyway as it is, and they said we don't really have that full-time sort of work half the time, so they usually just outsource that sort of work. And then so knowing that if I want to work at this company, what sort of work would I be likely be doing, and then just trying to tailor your expectations to what you might actually doing, especially coming in at that entry level.
Yeah.
Cool. Life in the industry. All right, so what does your day-to-day look like these days?
I'm trying to replay it in my mind. There's a lot of like interaction throughout the entire day. Usually most of my day is talking. I never thought I'd say that, but here I am. Usually start my day just touching base with a couple of the guys. Maybe we have something that's a priority. We sort of get the wheels moving on that, just sense checking. We've got the team stand-ups. Sometimes we've got the artist stand-ups, which is just like it's away from the teams and it's an opportunity for other artists just to bounce ideas off of me as they come. Then it's a mix of like ongoing feedback, brief writing, outsource brief writing. Maybe I'll get to draw something. Maybe. and usually checking builds. Feedback on the builds. Yeah, as you can tell, I don't get to draw a lot. I'm very happy with what I do though, but yeah, it's a lot of feedback, and it's mostly all related to communication.
Yeah, I still remember, what was it, back at when you were still working with us at Cerebral Fix, I still remember that one time, I was like, oh, I feel like I'm just a spreadsheet artist at this point in time. There was a lot of that sort of thing.
Things have gotten much better since then. I've refined my craft.
Yeah.
No more Excel.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I've seen other things like process management things, like we didn't have Jira or anything like that, like any kind of like actual progress tracking sort of thing. It was just like, it's on a spreadsheet somewhere, I guess. So that sort of changed up over time.
Yeah, also the other thing, not to steal the limelight, the other thing is just overall sense checking with my team, not just about the project itself, but seeing where they're at. Like, I'm not, they don't often bring issues to me, but oftentimes I just want to make sure they're cool, they're good. I'll be doing that throughout the day, not like a nuisance, but like, so making sure we jam in well. You guys don't have life in the industry?
It's a very interesting question. I think, yeah, day to day for me is similar to Matt in the sense that there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of communicating with people. Really, my job as a lead for my team is really about facilitating things to help them do their job effectively, less about me and more about being able to make sure that they have the information they need. They're not getting bottlenecked by things. There's so many departments, especially with a game like World of Warcraft. It's an ongoing service and it's a game that's been going for multiple years now. So there's many different departments. There's a lot of touch points, and it really is about navigating that to look after my team first and foremost, because my role is to protect them and make sure they're doing a good job and that they can do what they need to do. But also knowing where to compromise with other teams and talking with design, with engine, things like that, and making sure that we can get what we need across as artists and be able to do that, but also that we're not breaking things on the other side of the game as well, and we're not ruining things for designers who also need to have their sort of areas. So it is a lot of that. It feels like there's a lot of plate spinning, and it's kind of like making sure that they're all going well. With a primary focus on my artists, I think first and foremost making sure that they're okay, that they're getting everything they need, and then secondary to that is outward facing, dealing to those other areas in the project.
For sure. I guess in my case it's similar, except well embedded into the design part of it. I'll start with the design, like a briefing from someone. And usually it's quite loose and then it tightens up over time, but part of the role to get that kicking off is talking to designers, talking to producers and being like, hey, we want to do this thing you've said, do we have enough time, do we not? And tease out that information so when I'm doing that concept art, the design fits really well, not just like thematically, but for the mechanics of the game, like if it's a gun, like where does a magazine clip, like is there other magazines? All those sort of questions which knowing them early on makes it a hell of a lot easier down the path, like if you were to pass it to 3D and if you've made a design mistake, it's not the best. So getting that information earlier means it's just easier for everyone else. And to follow on from that, like talking with 3D artists, getting them to give you a sanity check to be like, I've designed this thing, this is my opinion, what do you think, And from that part, sort of all the way down to the pipeline. And when it gets to the end, you just kind of look at the final product and just 50% of my job is sort of art QA, where I'm looking at things and making sure, we've set out to do this thing if it's a gun. Does it do what we thought it was going to do? Is it quality? Is it thematically in line with sort of what we got at the moment? Yeah, that and vaping.
Yeah, I think it's very similar for me as well, where I find most of my time is spent more communication, I guess, more talking, more meetings and stuff like that as it is. And it's been really interesting because I think initially you kind of feel like, I just want to keep doing the art and everything like that. But I think as I've kind of matured within the company, it's just I like those sort of catch-ups with people or having those sort of conversations, and it kind of feels like you guys have got that same sort of thing going, where it's just I like doing this sort of stuff, talking with people, trying to figure out the best way of doing things just as much, if not more, than the actual art itself some of the time, which is really cool. Not that I'll ever want to stop doing the art side of things, because that's really fun as it is, but it's just one of those things that I've just realized that as I've kind of joined within the company, way more talking is involved these days. And it's really helpful for not just you, but for helping others around you grow and lift as well, which is pretty sweet. All right, moving forward. So basically, how do we keep up to date with all the changes in technology these days? I know the tools that I had back in the day was essentially, all right, there's Maya, there's 3ds Max. Blender was just starting out and it was just really confusing. It's still confusing to me now. And Photoshop and probably Microsoft Paint. That was also there as well, I think, as it was. But yeah, there's so many new tools these days and stuff like that. How do you guys try and keep up with those sort of new trends, or how willing are you guys to adopt new technologies?
I'll take a swing at that one. Yeah, I think another really interesting question, because especially with a project like what I'm working on, like I said before, it's an ongoing service. It's a game that it doesn't really end, it keeps moving. And it was very different at the beginning if you were looking at early vanilla World of Warcraft, and then you look at some of the latest expansions now. There's quite an evolution in the way that it looks, and in the same token, it's still within the bumpers of the art direction of the overall, big chunky bold shapes, bright colors, really larger than life characters, and pushing that stylization. But we're always very conscious to look for new tools and try to integrate them into the pipeline. It has its own set of challenges, because obviously when you're dealing with a legacy product that has such a long history and already a very established pipeline, introducing new software is often quite time consuming or quite hard in certain ways. But we always try to be very open, and I know with my artists, I allow them to use whatever they can use to get the job done, providing it's within the art direction bumpers. I really don't mind. We do use multiple 3D software programs, and we're looking to sort of move towards a world where the 3D software can be more agnostic of the pipeline, so you can use Blender, Maya, Max, any of those 3D programs, and then you're putting it into the pipeline, which then becomes more proprietary. So we're really trying to be as flexible as we can to allow artists to be able to experiment and use different things. I know a lot of the guys on the team are starting to play around with Substance and how they can use that to create their textures. Again, it's challenging because you have to try to work in a way that fits with the art direction, and some of these are designed for more realistic games inherently, but you can actually use them for those other things, and quite successfully in some cases. Some of our artists are quite heavily into ZBrush, and they'll use ZBrush a lot to get their textures and put those onto the models. Other artists are just more traditional, and they'll use Photoshop, and they'll paint and paint, and they'll 3D coat, and they'll paint everything out in a very artisanal kind of more traditional way. So we do have a variety of different types of software, and we're always looking to look at ways to make things easier and better with new software. It's just a very challenging process and often can take some time due to the legacy of how long our project has been going for.
Yeah, and mostly I'm mostly in the 2D realm of the production of artwork, and especially when it comes to concepts. I know that there's multiple ways to get to that final result. Like some people will incorporate 3D, their Blender into their process, overpainting it, and some people are just straight up painters, it's line art. Whilst we open it up for artists to use the technology that they need to make their process efficient, it always appears back down into that final concept, which is still in line with what we're expecting. Is it sufficient enough for the 3D artist, et cetera, et cetera. So we do have a little bit more flexibility in that realm. Actually, you did too. When it comes to, just a thought as well, when it comes to a person who's not in the game industry and wants to aspire to be in the game industry, what's interesting now is that there's so much more free tools that they have access to that we didn't have 10 years ago without certain methods.
100%.
So yeah, I won't pretend. Blender, for example, is it's making waves. There's enough for a person who's in high school, or even under that, to start opening it up and kicking it around, and it opens up so many doors so early on. It's really exciting, really.
Sweet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Blender's my favorite subject at the moment. I think with concept art, especially internationally, internationally and going for the realistic AAA sort of look, Call of Duties, whatever, you know the sort of game it is. I don't think concept artists get much of a choice. There's a semi-arms race towards quality, and concept artists would use anything. Like you see a lot of node-based stuff and displacement maps for concept artists using, or making terrains. People using procedural stuff to make vehicles, and really getting into not just designing a single thing, but designing from all angles, designing from a game angle, rendering. And I mean, I see people use Unreal 5 at the moment to just render these fantastic environments. And also actually, with Unreal 5 being that accessible, sort of stepping a character into their concept, which is, I mean, if we take it back to one of the first questions, how has it changed over 10 years? I never would have thought we'd be going from I'm just sketching and when speed painting was the thing at the time, to now you do a sketch, you make some models in Blender, then you put it into Unreal and actually walk around in your concept. It's massive, and I think whenever you get the time to just sit down and just pick up some skills, don't be intimidated, just get in there bit by bit, take a step after the next step, and you kind of get in there.
Awesome. Another interesting, this is just for my own, trying to, information gathering purposes. How do you guys train people or teach people new softwares and stuff within your own companies and stuff like that as it is?
Yeah, depending on the software and depending on the level of competency of the artist, I think in a lot of cases, in my experience, the artist, for what we need them to do, has already a pretty high proficiency in the fundamentals, and then we'll often take time to do modules internally where we will work through, we have lecture places where we can actually work through software. We have, we kind of have the luxury at Blizzard of having multiple teams, production teams on different products, and often, for instance, someone on Overwatch might be using something that, like Houdini, that we haven't used, but they've found a really great way to proceduralize doing rubble and things like that. They'll come and do a module workshop, and they'll train our artists how to use that in a way that may speed up our workflow quite a lot. And even though it might not be exactly what they're doing, it gives us a really good base, and our artists a really good base to start training using that method and going forward and working out ways that we can integrate that into our pipeline. So yeah, I guess the short answer is we do modules and things for anything that we think is going to add a lot of value and bring it into the pipeline.
Cool. How long do those modules usually take? Is it just a one-off sort of thing, or is there any kind of class work-ish?
It varies on how complex they are, but they can go over several months. We might do a Thursday and a Friday afternoon over 2 or 3 months if it's quite an intensive course. And we'll have that person from the other team taking it, and they're already sort of a champion in that area. So they'll already be well ahead, and they can answer any questions and things. So we do have a good advantage in that sense, where it's a really open resource for artists to be able to level up and tap into that skill. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, on the smaller side of things, I've got about 10 artists on my team, and we have a few guys who they're very driven for their self-growth, and they're always finding new methods, and they're exploring new tech, and we encourage that because they also they also like to teach it to the rest of the team. So likewise, we free up like a Friday afternoon sometimes. It's usually dependent on the team if they are wanting to grow. If we really need to level up with that, we will decide, hey, let's free up the Friday afternoon and let's hear out the lesson. He'll walk us through like a workshop. Sometimes even we've had artists kind of collaborate with coders to kind of cross-discipline teach each other things, and that's been really successful.
Cool.
For sure. I think anywhere I've ever been, getting excited about the tool often rubs off on other people. I've only been doing sort of Blender, like before that I did Maya, but I wasn't that interested in it. But when Blender came along and it was kind of a great tool for fast prototyping and concept artists, I just got excited. And then I think at Rocketworks we all use Blender, and there's enough hard surface stuff that it just kind of fits, and I was excited enough about it to spread it. And then at the same time that spreads it on. There's a few other people that use Blender too. Like, I think as new tools grow, it becomes exciting, and then it just kind of spreads anyway. It's just trendy at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at our studio as well, there's a lot of like just you'll be watching someone else work in the background, like, oh, how'd you do that? That's something new. Show me how you did that sort of thing. And I think other people, everyone tends to come in with their own sort of workflow that helps them do whatever they do best, it feels like. And sometimes you just cherry pick the things that kind of like, oh, that's a way better way of doing it that way around. And then so a lot of that sort of learning at our studio kind of happens organically by just being around the other artists around you as it is. And it's cool that you mentioned that you guys got like those sort of module things and stuff going as well. I think that's something that we're planning on trying to do that sort of stuff within our own studio as well. So it'll be really cool to see that, oh, cool, that's what other studios do as well. So cool knowing that that's actually a thing that obviously it sounds like you guys getting some real good value out of that sort of stuff. So that's really cool to know.
For sure. And I think, not to grab the limelight, but I think one other thing I would say, if you're looking at it from a starting out in the industry point of view, a lot of questions I get asked about this from artists that are coming into the industry. What software should I use? Should I learn ZBrush? Should I learn Substance? Am I going to get a job if I don't know how to do a high poly sculpt? I think having an open mind to learn different software is always the way to go. Conversely to that, there's some artists that will just swear by a particular software program. I only use Maya. I don't want to use anything else. That's what I use. That's what I'm good at, and that's where I'm at. There's always a place for that. But what I would say is keep an open mind, because the more flexible you can be and the more willing you are to learn these workflows and these softwares, the easier it's going to be for you to fit into existing pipelines and existing workflows in studios. And it just generally makes things a lot smoother, and you'll have a far better experience being more open-minded and broad-minded towards multiple types of software. I mean, definitely we all have our favorites. I have my favorites too. But what I found learning different softwares is there's things that they do, little areas that they do really well that you don't even understand. Had you not used it, you wouldn't even know. And sometimes that can help you a lot. And bringing those sort of things back into your other modeling programs is super helpful as well. So I would just say, yeah, just keep a very open mind as far as software goes. Don't try to box yourself into one particular program or one particular method.
Yeah, because in another 10 years' time, who knows how many other new
Exactly.
software things are going to be around as well. I think it just helps studios level up as well, just knowing that, all right, this thing might be coming down the path in sometime in the future. Let's keep an eye on that thing, because that might actually make all of our work like substantially easier to work with.
And oftentimes the fundamentals are shared amongst them anyway. So
100%.
yeah.
Yep.
Sweet. All right, so the next thing is obviously we've kind of found ourselves in these sort of like senior positions and stuff like that. I just want to know what your guys' thoughts were when it comes to things like leadership and your own approaches when it comes to leadership.
Well, I think you were mentioning earlier about developing soft skills. You were mentioning about, it being important for any candidate. I believe it's important for any team and any person in my team to have some level of communication ability. And it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be an extrovert or an introvert, but understand that they're making a product in the end together. And they're communicating ideas, they're communicating methods in order to achieve that. And they basically also have to be cohesive as well. One of just a bit of a side thing as well, when my job is almost 90% communication, I'm also trying to relate art direction and ideas in my mind before I put pen to paper. Before I've even drawn something or sketched out something, I'm trying to boil it down to language and words that I can convey to the team. and I know we're on the same page. We can all understand that, and then build it up together. So communication, number one.
Yeah, definitely communication. I think empathy is a huge one. Going into a leadership role, having empathy for people is, in my opinion, absolutely critical for a positive work environment. All those good words, right? Empathy, honesty, humility, all those things, because as a leader, really the most effective leaders that I've seen are the ones who understand they're actually serving the people under them. The people under them aren't serving them. And if you're going in with that frame of mind, you can't really go too far wrong. I found there's always gonna be things like I've learned sort of going into a lead role, coming out of an individual contributor that you don't think about. There's a whole next level of conflict resolution, and you're dealing with a lot of people, and you're dealing with those people in a sense of this is their livelihood, this is their career. They deserve to grow in their career, and they deserve to be able to move forward, and you need to be able to facilitate that. So it is quite a big load on your shoulders when you think of it that way. But as long as you're putting those things first, I've found in my own experience and effective leaders around me that I've seen tend to do this. You generally can't go too far wrong as far as like making big mistakes.
Yeah, just to say something based on that as well, the humility and yielding, and that fostering that trust. That when you give, for example, there's always gets to a point where there's going to be some pretty heavy feedback. Maybe the person didn't understand the brief. What you're trying to foster is a relationship with the artists on your team, to know that when you're deploying the feedback back to them, it's really about achieving something together. I'm not trying to crush the person. I want them to trust me that I've had their best interests in mind, and that takes a lot of time, and I think it's well worth it.
Yeah, like exactly on that point. I know that it's something that I've had to try and figure out my own side of talking to people, just understanding that there's also different ways that you need to be talking to different people. You can't treat everyone exactly the same. There are things that it comes down to that empathy side of things, like, all right, this is how this person responds to sort of things as well. And that's something that I've had to kind of pick up over the years, like, all right, I can't just treat everyone exactly the same as I used to and stuff like that. People are different and everything. So understanding that has been one of the really big things that I've been trying to pick up as well. And so that only starts when you start talking. It's that communication thing. When you start to talk to those around you and understand where they're coming from, that you really start to see yourself grow into those sort of leadership roles.
Yeah, for sure. I think having that one shared goal and communicating with each other is really important. Also, sort of, the information you would want is the information another artist would want. So making sure they've got all the tools and information they need to do the best job possible, so they get results, they're happy about it, make it fun along the way, Yeah, communication, man.
Yeah.
And celebrating it, yeah.
Right, sure.
When you get everything coming together, actually take the time to step back and go, yeah, the team made this thing. Really enjoy it.
It's not many things more satisfying than like having multiple people work towards the single goal and achieve it, It's a good feeling.
Yeah, it's the big payoff.
Yeah. Sweet. Nearly at the end of this sort of thing. So the first thing is, like, do you guys have any kind of pro tips or suggestions, whether they're like art hacks or life hacks in general? Anything there?
My pro tip, my biggest one would probably be just keep practicing, keep making things. There isn't a silver bullet to be an amazing artist. Every amazing artist that you see out there has spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours practicing, and at some point they were not very good. Like nobody is generally, with a very rare exception, nobody is born an amazing artist. It is a learned skill. There is ways that you can, in my experience, move faster, and that's usually through people that are very passionate and they let their passion drive them. But there really is no way around it apart from always be creating. That's something that...
ABC.
Yep.
ABC.
I stole that from somebody.
You stole it from Samwise.
Yeah. But it's very true. He says it all the time, and it's very true. You should always be, if you're an artist, always be creating. It doesn't even have to be the medium that you're doing as a job. It could be traditional art. It could be going out and doing a cooking course, or just opening your mind to be creative about things is the biggest thing. And practice. Don't stop practicing. That's the key. It's really, there's no hidden magic bullet. It's continuing to practice, giving yourself honest feedback about your work, seeking honest feedback from your peers all the time, and don't be discouraged when they say it's actually not that good, or thank them because they're being honest enough to tell you that your work needs to level up. Here's where they think it might not be right. Maybe you could use that. That's really useful information. Use that to fuel you, to drive you forward. Don't use it as a discouragement. That would be my pro tip.
Right. I've got a couple. I'll get cracking right into what you said about creativity and growth within it it's a very personal thing, and that's what makes us quite reluctant to be vulnerable and open up for feedback, for criticism especially. Just a bit what you said, it's often like pursuing improvement inside a gym. You are not working out for everyone. You have a goal that you're trying to achieve, and it's really down to yourself. You might hit plateaus, you might hit points of frustration, but it is driven on your own practice and your own dedication to the craft. I would try to reduce as many distractions as you can from seeing other people. Sometimes they just speed along. And you won't, because of social media, you will often not see the challenges they go through. You often not see the sort of dedication they might have. And sometimes they actually just luck out. Sometimes that happens too. And you have to remove that part of it from the equation to help your own growth. The second thing is, dump the Wix websites. Definitely consider an ArtStation website. This is not a sponsored message. It's something, it's like one of the best feedbacks I've seen come from people is just like when you're trying to get a job or you're trying to make a great portfolio. ArtStation is tried and tested. It's fast. You can buy your own domain name. It's great. So definitely, it's a great investment. Definitely consider it. And
big plus one to that. I think
big plus
100%.
Plus one. What about Blogspot? Like,
and the third one.
no, I agree.
And the third one is social media is a double-edged sword. You can get a great amount of exposure by making things, sharing things. It's great to get stuck in with art communities, but be very, very mindful about, in your pursuit of growth, sharing things for likes, basically. You get a dopamine hit from seeing people comment positively on a picture that you've done, and what happens is it creates an opportunity, it creates like a point in your brain where you're like, hey, that's all I need to do? Great, nice. That will come to bite you in the butt. You will start limiting your growth by points where I need to get some approval for this. You unconsciously will do this. You're not actually trying to hurt yourself, but you'll hit frustration points when no one comments, no one likes it, and you'll start throwing away the growth that you did, thinking that it was in the wrong direction altogether. So be mindful of it. Try not to pursue it too hard. You can pursue growth instead and then post it at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything there. I'd add to that, like, it is hard, art's subjective. You go through ups and downs, plateaus. Sometimes you can't sort of get out of whatever funk you're in to sort of progress yourself. But it makes it a lot easier if you find some sort of way to love the job. I remember early on in my career, I loved the job. But over time, it became a job. It takes a bit of like time, and I think working constantly, like trying the things you want to try that you probably won't get to try at work, and find things to get addicted to, passionate about again. Yeah, try love the job. It gets you a lot further and makes it easier to do, I think.
Cool. I guess my pro tip would be to never stop asking questions. I think sometimes you'll go, like I've seen new people coming into the studio and it feels like they don't want to bother anyone, so they won't ask questions if they don't know how to do something. It almost feels like they kind of feel like they need to be performing from day one and really hitting their stride there. But usually most people have no issues at all, just like answering things and just replying to those questions and stuff like that. I don't think there's no such thing as a stupid question, I think, anyway, as it is. So if you're getting into studios, or even if you're well established, don't stop asking questions and just keep talking to people as well. Keep asking those sort of questions. That'd be my biggest tip for.
If you get a negative reaction from asking questions, yeah, try not to take that on board as some problem that you have that's your own. Sometimes people do react badly. Just ignore it. Carry on asking questions. Move along.
Yeah.
Sharpen twice, cut once.
That's right. I remember that one from you. Yeah.
It's also a really good technique if you're trying to get feedback on something as well, rather than just doing the old just like post it and forget it and hope someone might say something like, what do you think? And then people will just do that like button or smiley face emoji or other random emojis or whatever the heck it is. But if you want to get good feedback, then ask questions ask like, what do you guys think about this hand position, or what do you think about this sort of face? Try to get conversations going to try and get actual answers that you can actually act on. I think that's a really good thing when it comes to trying to get feedback from others. Cool. So now I guess it is time for questions from the audience, or awkward silence, however it tends to go. So we've got a bit of time there, so any questions from out there? Awkward silence, there we go.
Awkward silence? Questions?
So, as senior artists, you've been at more of training and practice in art. How often do you practice your art outside of work hours?
All right, so basically, how often do you kind of, like us as senior artists, still get to actually practice our own craft or art outside of work hours?
2 hours a day.
That was very specific.
That's what I've worked it out to.
Right, yeah. Is that a plan?
So yeah, that's actually a good topic. Let's talk about that. So you can throw the whole 10,000 hour thing, like random, just keep working on it. Or you can focus it into particular practices, like a focused target practice. So if I know that I'm either trying to, if I'm just doodling, I'll just make it a doodle day. But if I'm trying to improve hands, for example, I will make that a focused, attentive 2 hour block. That way it fits into my schedule and I know that I get the improvement. I just don't believe that you need to throw 10,000 hours at something and then hope on the other end that it might get better. Focus is good.
I think also, once you, like as you said, if you're a senior artist in the industry, you're obviously doing a fair amount of day-to-day work in your job itself, and you know, implementing a lot of art into the project that you're working on. I think it's really important to look after yourself first, and sometimes that means it's okay to take a step back in your own time and not do those things, like, you know, read a book, go watch a movie with a friend, go for a walk, go for a run. Like, I wouldn't suggest beating yourself up too much about, I have to do this or I'm gonna start falling back or whatever. Your own sort of personal health really matters. Once you get into the industry, especially if you start stepping up into like senior roles and things, you have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders already. Don't add another layer to that and then beat yourself up at home because you feel guilty because you're not doing personal work. It will come and go. Like for me personally, I will do things over a period of time. I'll do like a project in Unreal and I'll be like, I'm feeling really motivated, I'm just gonna bash this out. And I'll spend a lot of time, probably more than I should in my own time, just because I'm really fired up and I want to get it done. And then other times I might go for like a month or two and I won't do any personal work because I just feel in my mind that I'm not in the right space for it, and I think that's okay. I think you can give yourself a break and let yourself kind of just recover in other ways. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I'm somebody you, Shem, where when I'm feeling like I want to do art, I'll do art, but a lot of times I'll do months without touching anything. And I think that builds up the curiosity again. We're like, I really want to draw this or attempt that or try a new program.
Yeah. Disclaimer, motivation pending for me as well. I say 2 hours a day. Generally, I can work a week like that. But yeah, if I'm not feeling it, I'm not going to beat myself up about it.
Yeah. I've lived a notoriously double-edged life in that regard. I think last year I was also doing a thesis on top of working full-time, and then I even started teaching at a university part-time as well. And it was just like everything started piling up. And then so, yes, I love doing all that sort of work and everything, but like Shem said, sometimes it's good to just stop for a while, live an actual life. Like those times where you get really passionate or motivated to do something, use those times to really put in like dedicated, targeted, focused practice there, rather than just like, all right, I'm just gonna draw something here. It's not really gonna do anything. It's just like, all right, cool. Training up the muscle memory, I guess, more than anything else.
Just for fun. Just something for fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a firm believer of something that David Lynch once said about the creativity should be like comfortable. It should be enjoyable. You shouldn't, the idea of the starving artist isn't necessary to make great stuff. You should enjoy what you do. Yeah.
I think that's the big thing, yeah. Just don't force the art to kind of be there as well. Because like I think you mentioned earlier when you were talking about like the social media sort of thing, where you can really track yourself in when you start feeling like, oh, I actually need to do something because I need to put something up for others to see what I'm currently doing and everything as well.
And when you stop doing that,
Yeah.
you'll feel even worse every day.
Yeah, I think I started doing some stuff on Twitch a while back, and I was like, all right, I'll do some art on Twitch and everything. I was like, oh, cool, getting more people, getting more people, getting more people. And then you just kind of feel bad that, oh, I don't really have that motivation to do anything tonight. And then just feels like, oh, what am I doing? I don't want to be doing this right now. I just want to watch another episode of an anime that I'm watching or something like that. So sometimes you just got to take those breaks and strike when the iron's hot more than anything else, I guess. Yep. Cool. Sweet. Yeah.
What video game or its outlet inspired you most throughout your career?
What is our game inspirations, I guess? It's really
Where
interesting.
do you start? Like, do we go nostalgia? I'll tell you, the game that got me into really wanting to make games was Dungeon Keeper, and the old Bullfrog games and Syndicate. I was like, this is something I definitely want to do, and unfortunately, they no longer exist. But in terms of a art style now that I found really enjoyable, Persona 5. I thought that was really graphically, not just the visuals itself, but the cohesion and the energy that you feel from it is just right. I love it.
Cool. Yeah, I know for me, it was probably, the first one was probably Age of Empires. And then what was better about that was it's just like, it also inspired a lot of other areas of my own personal interests as well. And the other really cool thing was it had like the game editor sort of thing, the scenario editors. And that's what really made me passionate about like, I can actually make my own game. And eventually I'll be able to make a cooler looking character than the one that's here because this helmet isn't big enough. I'm this sort of guy. Want a better, cooler looking Spartan helmet, everything like that. And then so that was a really big one for me. And then down the line, it ended up being games like Warcraft 3 was another really big one because that also had that same sort of thing and it had an art style that I just absolutely loved because I love stylized sort of art. So, and then all those sort of games, kind of like the hand-painted stuff, that's the stuff that I'm always passionate about playing and seeing.
Yeah, that was me too. I think Warcraft 3, especially Frozen Throne, was when I was like, this is fun, this is really cool, hugely inspiring. And then that sort of just, anything else after that is interesting to me because I like to see a game that was really well made. But that was the first source of inspiration, I think.
I'm going to show my age a little bit here. I actually grew up playing a lot of Sierra adventure games. I don't know if anyone knows about those, but they really captivated my love for kind of like adventure and RPG and fantasy, heroic fantasy specifically. And then that kind of evolved, and I just always sort of went more towards stylized. I love stylized art. For me, realism was kind of boring because I was like, trying to replicate something that's in real life. For me, it never really resonated, and I always moved towards like stylized kind of things. Moving up from there, there's so many games. I mean, Warcraft 3 obviously is a huge one. World of Warcraft I played well before I worked in the industry, and it was one of the reasons that I actually wanted to get into the industry, like ignited my passion for making video games. That was a huge one for sure. Other games that are awesome, like Castlevania, super cool. Darksiders, obviously, like hugely cool art style, all super aggressive, super stylized, love it. Very much more towards stylized games and stylized art has been probably my biggest inspirations.
Cool. Sweet. I think there was another question here. Yeah.
This one might be kind of specific, but because you guys all have senior positions, have you ever had a point in your career where you're like developing the look of something, you've got like 90% of the way, but you just can't push it that extra 10%, you just can't put your finger on what it is, and like how do you get out that kind of, how do you tackle those?
It's an interesting one because I know for me, like I'm never satisfied with all the work that I ever do as it is. So it's just like, at what point do you just like, all right, this will have to do for now. You can always make things better, I guess. So it's a really interesting one. I think on our case with our studio, a lot of the stuff that we tend to do is usually client focused. So there's usually like that sort of thing. So there's usually like a client art director on their side that's usually determining that style, and it's up to us to kind of hit that bar consistently. But what about you guys?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it happens all the time, for sure. Like, so many assets and things, like you're making them and you think, something's not quite there. Most of the time for that, I think the biggest help that I've had is just leaning on my peers around me. asking my team. Like we have review processes where the artists can come together and they'll show what they're working on, and in a very sort of environment like this, like I'll be like, I did this week, and the other artists in the team and their peers and coworkers will be sitting around, they're like, that's really cool. Hey, it would be awesome, or what if it da-da-da-da-da? And then it leads into conversations of things that you never even thought of. And I think tapping into that resource of all those artists that are around you, and because there's a whole bunch of creative problem solvers there that are going to think in things that you haven't even thought of, usually we'll get it across the line. To Mikey's point, there's a point where I think in production that you have to kind of hands off, like just from getting things done. Sometimes it's like, I would have liked to have done this, but there's literally not the time. And through a player lens, I know that, I beat myself up harder than if a player runs in and they see this, they're going to be like, wow, this is awesome. And they're probably not even going to know that little extra thing you wanted to do. So it's also that too, sort of thinking about it from a player lens perspective, if it's professional work. Personal work, I beat myself up a lot harder on personal work because I'll tend to like noodle things and it's not quite right, I want to make it this one. But you can have that luxury, but I think in the industry side of things, it's like leaning on your peers, asking your fellow artists, and then understanding when it gets to a point where it's like, this is great, a player's going to love this, I'm going to just step back and keep moving.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah. Just quite simply, don't look at it so long and look at something else. Move your focus away from the thing that's sort of consuming your mind, and honestly do something else, work on a different asset, maybe go back to something that's a little bit more designery in terms of myself, like concepting. Oftentimes that sort of just takes your foot off the accelerator just a bit. You're not trying to force yourself to find the answer, because you'll never find it that way. You have to take a step back, and it sort of sometimes will freeze it up, generally.
Yeah, I mean, 90% is pretty good. I don't think.
Yeah, pretty much. 50? Yeah.
Art never really finishes. Like it's like I was saying before, subjective. It might be 100% to you, but isn't 100% to someone else. There's a lot of questions. I think if you've got like a similar task, or like you're like, it's 90%, let's go to the next thing. You'll often find you'll be working on a problem that's fresh, the thing's new, you're excited about it, and you'll relate it back to that last problem you might have. And hopefully by chance you might get a little bit more insight into what you may be missing on an asset, or like a collection of assets, whatever it may be. But yeah, 90% is pretty good.
Yeah, sometimes you ship it. Yeah. Our 50% is usually like, that's fine. Yeah. I mean, you enter the realm of diminishing returns, and you just keep on plowing away at something. It's just like, see what other people think about it.
Cool. I'm not sure how much time we have left. I think I'm looking at this thing here and it says it's 6 o'clock, which probably means we've already overshot the time sort of thing anyway. But yep, and I'm also getting the guy saying, hey, you guys got to wrap it up. So. In any case, thanks so much, guys. And I just want to say a massive thanks to you guys for joining me on this panel as well. And enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.